formerly co-owner of the largest private training gym in Manhattan, today's guest has designed fitness spaces and well-being facilities for some of the most iconic locations in New York City. His lifestyle brand continues to educate clients across the country with holistic designs, consulting, and operations management in luxury gyms and residential projects. So please join me in welcoming strength and conditioning specialist, celebrity trainer, and gym designer, Mr. Jay Wright, CEO of Wright Fit, to the Escape Your Limits podcast. So look, thanks for inviting me. This is truly a gem.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
When I came here last time, it was a building site. Well, part of it was and part of it wasn't. And so I can't believe how it's come on, really.
Yeah, it's been crazy. It's been a journey for sure. You know, we built this out in 2 phases. So we took the space in May of 2017, and it was at the time we took a lease for the whole 4th floor and the roof as well. So the 4th floor is the top floor of the building, and this side, so the east side, was the Loretta Howard Art Gallery. So it was an existing art gallery. She was ready to move. She actually just moved down the street, and it was a relatively easy sort of repurposing of the space. It took about 4 months. We actually moved in at the end of May, beginning of June, so they were doing kind of the construction work while they were around us. We asked them, it was in pretty good shape, and we have a penthouse where we moved our operations center for the company, our headquarters. So it didn't take much to repurpose that. We just kind of put up one glass partition to make an office for me and move some things around. And then we developed a personal training studio in the back, and started to operate that commercially in just around Labor Day of 2017. Simultaneously during that summer, a separate contractor was building out the other side, which was a full gut renovation. Nothing was there at the time. You saw what it kind of looked like. And they had to actually lift the roof about 2.5 feet, build a second penthouse, connect it to the original one. We had to take out some columns because we wanted a column-free space over there. So a lot of engineering, a lot of heavy steel beams being, carted up and craned up. So that process took a little over 2 years, and we just started wrapping it up last week. And in the final completion stage now to go fully operational Labor Day this year, 2019.
Right. Yeah. And this is, explain the area you're in, because this isn't just a normal, this is quite a sort of important part of New York, isn't it?
Yeah, very cool. A lot of, like New York, there's been a great deal of development all up and down the island. Really, it's hard to find a spot that hasn't been developing. But particularly along the west side of the island, from the upper 60s on the West Side Highway all the way down to the financial district, has been developing quite a bit. A lot of beautiful real estate, everything from Greenwich Village, West Village on up to here. So this is West Chelsea, primarily an art district, a lot of galleries, a lot of warehouse space. And a really interesting area that's developing. We have one of the more successful private schools in recent history in the city, about 5 or 6 years old, called Avenues World School across the street. We have Hudson Yards, which is the largest real estate development in the nation's history so far, just 8 blocks up the street. A lot of high-end residential buildings, a lot of mixed commercial use. So an interesting, I think this is going to become a real hub, and part of Hudson Yards was they put in a brand new subway station that has a PATH station, which the PATH goes to New Jersey, and all the subway lines feed into there. So I feel like we picked a pretty nice spot to grow into. Yeah.
It seems by looking around it that it's prime real estate. How do you kind of make a business like this work in where you've got a Lamborghini garage opening down the road and art galleries? Was it a big sort of concern about doing that?
It's interesting. So, and this is probably where we'll probably get into a part of the discussion a little bit later on about whether or not we've made some mistakes or learned some lessons. But my approach to business was wasn't driven from a business perspective, but was driven from a qualitative perspective for the brand and what we represent. And one of the things for me, as I started to get into physical fitness and think about where I was spending all my time and what impacted people, it meant so much to me as a lifestyle choice that I felt like the environment was extremely important to people achieving results and to feeling good. So we've always wanted as a brand, we do a great deal of design globally, really beautiful gyms, high-end luxury condominiums, hotels, resorts, things like that. And the environment, we wanted to, one of our MOs as a company was to elevate the experience of fitness and wellness from a design perspective, from a service perspective and from a programming perspective. So, hospitality being a little bit more than, say, customer service, we could do that and integrate that in any facility we were in. Programming for sure, but design was important. So I wanted to be above ground. I wanted a lot of light. I knew that we were going to do something interesting and integrate our headquarters with a commercial consumer-facing platform. So I knew I would be spending the majority of my time here, and this would be extremely important. I love being in gyms, but I love being around light. So we took the space with the idea that design was going to be important. And the interesting thing about our brand and our business, if I was just starting a gym, I would not probably have taken this space, or I would have thought long and hard about the funding, how long it would take to grow the business organically, get clients to come over here. But we had the luxury, so to speak, that we had a fully functioning brand and business before we kind of backed into it backwards. So we have an extended business out and around. We design globally, we manage a great deal locally. And we provide consulting services across the country and other countries. And so we were able to kind of build this as a consumer-facing platform and buy ourselves enough time. And this is more than just a commercial space for driving revenue from a fitness and wellness perspective. It's also a showcase. So for any kind of clientele that we deal with, so developers in the real estate industry, it's a place for me to bring them. And I thought at a certain point, as I was consulting with people and advising them on what to do, and back in the day when I started this business, I was also at the time a partner and co-owner of the largest private training facility in Manhattan at the time, which was called Peak Performance. We had a 10,000 square foot strength and conditioning center that predated a lot of the boutique market around New York. So that was kind of my calling card from a consumer facing platform. So developers who came in and I was advising them on how to develop their facilities and programming, I could show them around Peak Performance and kind of brought the same model that my partner and I utilized there into sort of the residential context, corporate context, travel and leisure context. But I left that business in late 2012. It's subsequently closed in 2016. And I felt a little disconnected from the consumer-facing side, and I felt like I wanted to put my money where my mouth was. And so as I was advising people on what to do, I wanted to build my own space here so I could walk people through and kind of show them both the design intent, how we pick the equipment like Escape, what's the progressive brands that are out there that are changing the industry, what type of flooring do we use, so on and so forth. So this works as a showcase as well. So we drive revenue in an ancillary manner in that way. And then also, really important that this was, we're a company that currently we have about 300 employees. And so that's across a full spectrum of, front desk personnel, lifeguards, maintenance, up into management level, and then up into corporate kind of executive level. And I wanted to have a space for my team to be able to come, work out together, develop a community, and really develop our company or our brand culture that people could come and touch and feel it, without just seeing it in other people's environments. Yeah. So a little bit different.
So how did this journey start? I know years ago you were a model. Is that kind of?
Yeah.
Is that one of the things you don't talk about?
It's true.
So how did you go? What was that journey like? Because you're obviously in a great place now, but I'm sure it wasn't all plain sailing, was it?
Yeah, no. That's interesting. So I've been an athlete all my life. I started working with strength coaches when I was 15 for football. I'm from the South. I'm from Tennessee. And, we take athletics very seriously down there, especially on the American football side of things. We ran our high school program ran a collegiate style football program where we practiced or played 10 months out of the year. So I was always working with strength coaches and working for physical fitness from an athletic perspective. But then after our university, I started modeling, traveled the world. I was fortunate enough to live in Europe for, 2.5 years, got to Tokyo and so on and so forth. And it's what brought me to New York. But throughout that whole phase, for men, it was really a women's industry. I mean, by and large, one of the only industries in the world where, thank God, they're actually given their due. And so for us, we had to be able to do everything. It wasn't like you could just do runway or print or something like that. So I felt like I was taking my shirt off at every other casting, so we had to stay physically fit. So I spent a lot of time in gyms, and I wanted to really study, the science behind. If I felt like if I was going to spend a lot of time in a gym, I wanted to study it and understand it. So, modeling in one sense kind of got me integrated a little bit more into physical fitness. So I saw gyms all around the world, in Europe, in Milan, in Paris, Amsterdam, Tokyo, and here in the States in LA, and I lived in Denver for a little bit before I moved here. So I had a good understanding of what fitness was like kind of globally. And, when I started to figure out that I wanted to kind of phase out of modeling, I wanted to stay put, because when you model, you're kind of transitory. You're always going from market to market, wherever the work is. Wanted to stay in New York, own some furniture. I was in a relationship at the time and was thinking about the next steps. And a buddy of mine who's a photographer now was like, hey man, you shred, like in the gym. I got a buddy who just opened a gym. You should go talk to him. So I went over and talked to a guy named Rich Beretta, who had he worked for Equinox for a long time. He opened up a gym called the Duomo, and this was back in 1998. And, had a chat with him about potentially coming to work with him and study underneath him for a little bit. And that's how I started the journey into personal training. And within a few months, I realized that I'd kind of found my home for what I wanted to do as a business. And so started as a personal trainer. And then, that whole thing is, I think when you're a personal trainer, I took the approach of I incorporated myself and ran it as a personal business. And the same way I would run any business, really tried to run a tight ship, good customer service, take care of everything. And, I had the opportunity to start to consult. I realized I wanted to have my own space. So I was going to open up my own studio, and I had a client at the time, Graydon Carter, who was sort of a mentor to me. He was formerly the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair. Really great guy, and really obviously great taste, understood pop culture. And so he was going to help me kind of get established as far as starting a studio. I wanted to work with actors to get them ready for movie roles and things like that. And one day, he jumped up on a treadmill. We were getting ready to work out, and he was on a non-fiduciary advisory board for the W Hotels, and said that they were thinking about starting a line of gyms globally, but they weren't too sure whether they were going to do a spa or a gym. So he introduced me to Barry Sternlicht, who was the CEO and chairman of Starwood Hotel Group. So I spent a little over a year consulting with him, all of 2003, about a line of gyms called the Wright gyms for the W Hotels globally. That got put on the back burner when Barry stepped down to focus his time. He stepped down as the CEO and the chairman of Starwood and started to focus on Starwood Capital. So he got back into private equity, and at that time I became a partner at Peak Performance. And from there, the journey kind of evolved a little bit.
With that sort of potential opportunity, what I guess was that something that at the time you sort of hanging your hat on, thinking that might actually happen, and
yeah.
How did that? What was that like when it probably didn't sort of carry through as you'd hoped?
That was disappointing because it was a big deal. I mean, we were starting out with their flagship over here on 53rd Street in Lexington, and looking at literally globally, they had about 14 W's in the pipeline, everywhere from Hawaii to Tokyo. And so when that got put on the back burner, it was a little bit disappointing, but then. That's how the universe kind of works. When one door closes, another door opens. The gentleman that owned Peak Performance at the time was having a tough go of it, just running it by himself. He had a successful personal training studio that he turned into a gym, which was about 5 times bigger, about 10,000 square feet. And so he needed some help, and that was a good opportunity for me to get some operational experience, because at that time I was still just a personal trainer and a strength coach and was working on business plans, but had never really operated a full-scale gym. So it gave me the opportunity to pursue my passion as a strength and conditioning coach and work with clients, but also start to understand developing a business and a brand. And while I was doing that, I was thinking, we were affiliated with about 64 trainers. So we had some independents, some that worked for us specifically or exclusively, and always wanted to create more business, more revenue, more clients to work with. It started, when I was consulting with Barry, even though it was hotels, travel, and leisure, started to look at the residential market and see how it was changing in New York. And gyms were getting just kind of bigger in the residential context. They really didn't have an eye to design, but I thought that we might be able to expose our trainers to residents and buildings. So I started to look into that, and at the time an architect asked me to help him out and do a small gym for a private client in their home. So that was my first kind of consulting gig where we actually designed a gym with an architect, bought the equipment for them, and installed it and oversaw that. It was a small pied-à-terre over on the Upper East Side. And I started to think that might be a business we could get into and start to, as we saw the gyms developing in a residential context, there was no real eye to design. So I thought we might be able to engage with some residential developments and still do what serve my purpose for peak performance as far as growing the business there and exposing new clients to our trainers. And one of my clients at the time is a guy named Dan Loeb. He owns a hedge fund called Third Point. Super, super great guy. We used to go surfing together. And on a surf trip, I told him what, my idea about, expanding the business, starting a consulting business for design. And he had just purchased a penthouse at a property called 15 Central Park West. So he had really kicked the buying off there. And the developers of Zeckendorf Development, owed him a debt of gratitude, I think, to getting the ball rolling a little bit. So when he asked them to take a meeting with me to come up and consult, because he knew that they had plans to develop a large-scale gym, about 14,000 square feet. He had seen some of the preliminary plans, wasn't too crazy about it, trained with me at Peak Performance, loved what we did there, because we were sort of some of the leaders in our industry, at least in New York, in creating functional performance-based environments. The first in New York to have pushing, pulling sleds, first to have sandbags, the old school sandbags that were burlap, that just shaved your knuckles when you lifted with them. The first to really have kettlebells out on the floor. This was back in 2005. And so, selfishly, he wanted me to bring, a high-level gym up there, and then gregariously, he wanted to really help me out and get my business started. So he got an appointment with me with the Zeckendorfs, threw my hat in the ring against 5 other companies for the design. We're fortunate enough to win that bid, and that was our first project. And that's kind of how we got the ball rolling. And that was an introduction into dumping into the deep end of the pool, because we went from a small pied-à-terre to a 14,000 square foot facility in what's become the most successful real estate project in the city's history. Super, super successful. A lot of great people, love the residents up there. And we got to work with Robert A.M. Stern Architects. He's the Dean of Architecture at Yale. Wow. Just an icon in the architectural world. And got to work collaboratively with his architecture firm to start our first project. Right. And that also turned into a management operations agreement and a service provision agreement. And that was the start of the Wright Fit. So where we started as a consulting firm with a primary expertise in design, management operations firm, and service provision. So services we provide, personal training, group exercise, aquatic swim lessons, and soft tissue therapy.
How much of that was kind of, created in your mind from those early days? Like you had the guy with Starwood, and the door closed there. You found another opportunity. Did you always have this vision that that's where you were going, or were you just like relentless that something was going to happen, and you were just going to try all avenues? What was that sort of journey like, if you try and sort of think back on it now?
Yeah, I've always been passionate about what I do, and I feel like, I remember reading in a book, and one time I used to read a lot of business books, especially during the Starwood days. I was like really just diving into every business book I could get, leaning on my clients that were in the financial industry to help me understand spreadsheets and build all the business sort of matrices that I would need. And I found that, passion sells and conviction is convincing. And the thing that I've always loved about New York, and I'm from a small town, I'm from East Tennessee, from Knoxville, Tennessee, but my parents were really good about, they took us traveling all over the world. They were both teachers, but in the summertime we had 3 months off, and we would travel as a family. So they exposed me to a lot of cities, but I truly do believe that New York is one of the greatest cities on the planet, and for a lot of reasons. But when I came here, the energy was amazing, and the city, there's so much opportunity here that if you have drive, or if you have an idea and you just wake up every day and you know what you want to go do, this city will support it. It's big enough and diverse enough that if you come up with an idea, you can find a demographic that can support it economically, either small or large. And so I was always passionate about what I did, about physical fitness, but more on the teaching and education side. Like I said, I've got 3 sisters, they're all teachers. My dad was a professor, my mom was a teacher. So I kind of have teaching in my background. And more than training people to get fit, I always felt like it was sharing my passion and my passion for learning and education and knowledge, which is fundamentally what is at the root of our industry, I feel like, with other people, and that just created opportunities. So really, it's, they say luck is preparation meeting opportunity. It's kind of being prepared to take advantage and just say yes, and not know what my limitations were, and be like, sure, I can design a 14,000 square foot gym. Like, I've never worked in AutoCAD or anything. I used to have little cutouts on paper. I would take a picture and send it to the architect, and I don't know what they thought at the time. We work in CAD now, but at the time, I just didn't know my limitations and didn't know what I couldn't do, and it's been that way ever since. So, there was a part of me at the time, like this was back in around 2009, and we'd had the facility open at 15 Central Park West for a while. We'd gone through the recession here in this country, and around 2010, when it thawed out and the banks and developers started having more conversations about starting to extend money again for real estate development, you started to see the boom here in New York in 2011, 2012. So we started, a lot of developers wanted to see at that time, 15 CPW had operated at 30% above the market all through the recession, really tough times, right? I mean, the CEO of Goldman Sachs lived there. I mean, people from Lehman's, you name it, they all endured, and that property did extremely well. So developers around 2011 started coming around to see what made that project so successful. And it was a lot of things that made it successful. We just happened to have designed and managed the largest amenity there, which was super progressive at the time. So we had a progressive commercial model at peak. And so bringing that into the residential context blew people's mind. I mean, I had sleds you could push there. We had half racks, Olympic lifting platforms. We didn't have a lot of fixed path and motion machines, all cable-based, odd objects, things like that. People came around to take a look at it, and we started to get more interest and more requests for proposals. And I sat down with my first employee, a guy named Justin Millen, who still works with me. He's my senior project manager on the design side and helps me run that part of the company. And I was like, you know what? I can make a decision right now and decide I can either kind of stay small and keep this as a boutique business because I was still a partner at Peak Performance. I was still flourishing as a strength and conditioning coach and had a nice life. Was doing well, enjoyed what I did. And I was like, we can either stay small and run it like this, or I think we have the potential to grow really big and maybe just kind of go along with the ride and see how the development thing goes. And so I decided to do that and started to kind of invest time and energy into growing the design side, and knowing that basically a lot of our designs were it's about a 4-year build schedule on new developments, knowing that if we did it right, 4 years down the line with each project we took on, we would have the opportunity to convert it to a management agreement, and then we'd have the opportunity to bring services in. So it was definitely a long play.
Yeah.
But started to go down that road, and I know a lot of people at the time. I had guys that worked in development companies who were like, well, what are you going to do? This isn't going to last. You can't just run a business designing gyms in luxury residential buildings because there aren't going to be that many. I was like, I don't know. I'll just figure it out as we go, right? And next thing you know, the residential concept in real estate blew up. The corporate concept blew up. Now we're doing things like we just designed the gym at the TWA Hotel. I think it's the largest hotel gym in the world. At least that's how they're building. It's about 12,000 square feet. Wow. Amazing. And we're doing that now in travel and leisure. So it's really interesting that it's had legs, this whole kind of part of the business. Mm-hmm. But more than anything, it just coincided, and I don't think you could have predicted everything that's impacting our industry the way that it is, right? Just the global awareness now of fitness and wellness and how that's taken on into a lifestyle concept as people are starting to figure this out. They're never going to reverse that. It's like people have finally caught on to the secret that we knew all along, that physiology and taking care of yourself had profound benefits. It's not just about having a six-pack or looking good. That's all great, and that's very important for people to have a self-awareness and feel good about themselves. But when we're doing a deeper dive now, and what I really like is education levels among personal trainers. We started out, just as a small group, and as education has progressed, we now have universities. They all have 4-year education programs geared around exercise science now. That didn't used to be 20 years ago or 15 years ago. We have trainers in our business now. It's very common that they have master's degrees. We have PhDs working with us. And so it's part of what we do on the programming side. We have a sports and performance psychologist on staff. She's from Berkeley, California. And, we do a deeper dive into teaching people the concept about, yes, it's kind of about control. We have a philosophy called center point, and what's been the center point of my life, all my life, other than like a value system, was always physical fitness. It's always been something that drove me, something, like I said, I've been an athlete all my life, something that's kind of driven me towards always trying to stay fit, keep an eye on nutrition, and then started to understand now through working with a performance psychologist, understanding how we truly affect our physiology, affects our emotional energy. And we all have an emotional reservoir for energy. It can either be good or bad, full or empty. And if we take care of ourselves from a physiological perspective, our movement patterns, our sleep hygiene, our hydration patterns, our nutrition patterns, that directly affects our emotional energy. If we affect that in a positive way, we fill our emotional reservoir full of positive energy. And when we do that, that directly relates to our cognitive energy or our cognitive ability. So a lot of our clients, almost all of them, highly educated, very smart, very intelligent people. But everybody on a day-to-day basis is having sort of an arm wrestling match between emotions and mental or cognitive ability,
right.
You know, of what's gonna win there, things we know we should do or things we feel like we should do. And the emotion is usually gonna trump that, because no matter how disciplined you are, saying I am gonna get this done or I'm gonna do it, if you just don't feel good or don't feel like doing something, eventually you won't do it, or you just won't do it to the best of your ability. So if we affect our physiology, we affect our emotional energy positively, we unlock or unblock our cognitive ability, and that leads to a sense of well-being. And that was sort of a model that we constructed. We call it a coherence model, where coherence, you know, a definition of coherence is just a unified whole. And teaching people, we used to talk a lot about balance. The balance kind of gives you a sort of a misconception. Balance is always kind of equal, and things aren't equal in our life. Our work-life balance is never in balance. But we started to look at the word coherence, and so the opposite of coherence is chaos. Coherence is a unified whole, and we started thinking, okay, if we're making a unified whole out of all of this, then it makes sense, and then it creates that sense of well-being. If you do that, it just kind of cycles around. And, you know, knowing that, like, human beings always want a sense of control, but we realize control to a large extent is an illusion in this world, right? We can't control external forces that affect us. We can't control events outside of who we are. But where we can control is our intrinsic sort of reaction to that. And what we do have control over, again, is going back to that physiology, you know, how we move, how we train, what we do there, how we eat, what we put in our bodies, you know, the level of hydration, do we drink enough water, do we understand those mechanics and what we should be doing, and sleep, some of the easiest things in the world, right? And we have control over that. And if we do that, again, we create that model that works back around. That's sort of the concept for us.
How do you bring the mind into it? Because a lot of people we've spoken to on the podcast talk about the connection between the mind and the body. And if you've not, you know, got the mind with you, then, you know, the rest of it's going to be difficult to, you know, to stay with, and to whatever sort of physical goals you want to achieve. So how do you, I guess you're dealing with a lot of sort of very high performing clients in a lot of cases. How do you kind of, you know, what's that mind-body connection, and you know, if anything, what do you do to kind of, you know, develop and you know, have a healthy mind as well as body?
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, I think people have understood a little bit about mind-body for a long time, right? But they kind of separated them and thought, well, we'll take care of our physical sense of who we are, or over here we'll take care of our mental. Maybe it's education, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's something else. And what we're learning now is like sort of integrating it. We use more of a scientific model. So we're trying to base it on, you know, positive psychology, and use science, just like we would use exercise science to drive our programming at a higher level. We want to now bring, you know, the psychology of self-awareness into the whole concept. And it's interesting because you can draw backwards into many spiritual traditions. My dad was a professor of philosophy and theology and comparative world religion, so I grew up in a very interesting environment, exposed to a lot of spiritual content and understanding, you know, that sort of a difference between spirituality and religion. I've always been very interested, at least for the last, you know, 15 years, in Buddhism. I was fortunate enough to start studying the Buddhist tradition, the Bon tradition, with a Tibetan monk last year. I've been working with him for about a year, studying Buddhism with him and meditation. So drawing some constructs from there, where they have a very interesting, you know, integration of mind-body. But again, going back into psychology, we do a lot of testing, analytic testing. So a lot of people are familiar with the MBTI. It's called the Myers-Briggs Personality Type Indicator Test. It's based off Carl Jung's work with the mass conscious and developing personality types. we utilize something from a company called TTI. It's like a think tank of psychologists, and they have a battery of tests. One of them is called a trimetrics DNA. And so you take 3 assessments, psychological assessments. It takes about an hour to take it. There's no right or wrong answers, right? You're just meant to take it in a calm environment, answer truthfully to get feedback on who you are. And the 3 assessments, one is called the DISC, one is called driving forces, and one is called DNA 25. So the DISC is about observable behaviors and a lot to do with communication. So our style of communication, how we like to communicate to other people and how we like to be communicated to. Driving force is a lot about what motivates us, understanding what are our intrinsic motivators. And DNA 25 is just a category of 25 soft skills for leadership and self-awareness, and where you rank and where you put yours. None of them are better than the other. It's just where you kind of rank yours in an order of preference 1 to 25. So when we run a whole leadership program based on that. It's open to the public, but we utilize it for our own team internally. And so that's had a lot to do with us understanding how the physiological perspective of exercise science integrates seamlessly with the psychology of self and understanding emotional intelligence and pairing those two together to create superhumans. And again, to unlock the cognitive ability. So for me, this whole concept, and I know that I did a little prep work, you'd give me something to read before our interview, and like trying to look at the whole concept of like, what we're all about, and it's, what sort of like makes me get up and come to work every day, and what drives our vision, our brand, what our brand is about. And it's about education, and it's about teaching people. I find that people, society's tough. We're driven towards material possessions. Ego gets in the way quite a bit, and this goes back a little bit to Buddhist understanding that's helped me out a lot about understanding not to be attached to material possessions or ego, but to sort of understand who we are as ourself, try and educate people. We all come with a body, but nobody gets a user's manual. So one, we want to try and share knowledge to help people understand, unlock their potential, and also to focus on themselves in a way that I feel like there are 2 ways to focus on yourself. One is a selfish way, right, where you may focus on yourself only for yourself and only thinking about yourself. Maybe it's from looking better, performing better so that you make more money, you could do whatever, or it's okay to think about working on yourself when you're working on yourself for the betterment of people around you, whether it's your family, your coworkers, or society in general, but just to be a better person. So that's kind of what's driven our brand and our concept, both through when we design gyms, they're designed with a specific intent to provide people an environment that they can grow with as their knowledge for self-development grows, but also in the programming concept of teaching people, again, a little bit more about what it's all about, and not stopping just at the physical concept, but again, teaching them that, hey, everything you do physiologically literally affects your endocrine system, your parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous systems, all of that stuff, which directly affects how you feel, and again, goes back to that cognitive relationship. So trying to do that deep dive,
Sorry. Yeah. Do you think that some of it also is to do with when you are in that optimal position, physically, mentally, your ability to do things, to be creative and to make changes seems to be so different than when you're in a position where, you're stressed, maybe you're not totally feeling well, you're probably not sleeping, you're not running on full tank. I know the reason I asked the question is certainly, probably the last 6 months I've been, I've got my diet right, I've got my exercise right, I've got my sleep right, and my capability to just do stuff and the level of energy I have is totally different, where I can just do a lot more because I've just got so much more to give. And I suppose a lot of times it's like, well, you don't realize what you don't have. You don't realize you've only got, you're running on empty almost. Yeah. And do you feel that, getting that balance right, can change your ability in relationships, in your job, just in life in general?
Yeah, 100%. Not only, going back to like what you're saying, having more fuel in the tank for sure, but all of that. So even if you were getting it right, but you weren't affecting sort of a positive emotional thing, I think getting it set to where you have more ability to do more activity in a day, but starting to understand that we don't confuse activity with achievement.
Okay.
So I try and start every day and start every project or every conversation that I have with my team with 3 things: intention, expectations, and commitment. And so what's the intention for what I'm doing today? What are my expectations from that intention? And what's my commitment to getting it done? So that I'm not just running around with more energy doing different things, but I'm being really thoughtful about what I'm doing. Right. And that can come in a lot of different ways. It's just having like a good value system, understanding what you're trying to do. Because like you said, all of a sudden you get all this energy, and it's like, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to manifest that in a way that's meaningful to you? It's been really helpful. I know the interesting thing, people have been more aware and open to meditation in the Western society now for the last few years. A lot of transcendental meditation. As I mentioned, I started studying meditation more in the traditional kind of Buddhist methodology. And really part and parcel of doing that is just to slow your mind down, right. To kind of calm it down a little bit and get centered. And then when it comes back to our concept of like a center point, so that I come out of meditation or sort of like a time when I stop and can sit in a quiet environment and contemplate, and then think about how do I want to take the energy that I've built and manifest that. Right, and it's like it's what you're doing, like what, with your equipment, with your progressive kind of approach, which I really, really do love, what you've done with the industry in the sense of, bringing a level of design, because it's important now. It's, not only how things work, but how things look. But what you're doing with your podcast and things like that to create and spread awareness. Because there's, my dad coming back from his teachings and his practices was big on teaching people that we don't really, our sense of things, and at least in his way of interpreting it, was we're not dualistic. It's not me and you, that we're all one construct. We all live in one world, and we're all part of one pretty crazy, pretty awesome dream. And so when you start to think like that, it makes things a little bit better. And I think, sorry, that's a long-winded way of saying, I think when you take all that positive energy that you're talking about, and you all of a sudden you have this capacity. Is it a capacity for yourself, or is it a capacity to share with others and make other people's life, and just teach people what their potential may be,
And I think what I've just taken from that is I guess, yes, you've got that energy, you can have that go, but you've also got to get that sort of extracting yourself from it and just being, I guess, whether you call it conscious or in the moment or whatever, but just not getting carried up in the go, and being able to sort of look or think before you dive head first, which I guess is also a part of that whole, that whole sort of well-being, whatever you would call it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think like at the end of the day, if you're making people feel a little bit better, and they feel a little more coherent in how they're approaching things, it's just going to be a benefit to other people around you. And so when you think about society, we're pack animals, like at the root of who we are as human beings. It's, as you see things changing now with social constructs, amazing what WeWork did. They really changed. They're starting to change the world in an interesting way of like how they changed co-working spaces. Co-working spaces have been around for a long time. WeWork came in and really socialized co-working spaces, bean bags, beer on tap, coffee on tap. They made it an interesting, integrated concept. That coincided with technology changing to the fact that we have iPads and mobile devices, so we can work almost anywhere. We're not anchored to a desktop computer, right? So we can do that. So you see those kind of things working together. And then you started to see the advent of, boutique fitness. We're having Group X, people participating together, taking exercise together. So we're starting to see a lot more sociology kind of mix in, which I find really interesting, and kind of a balancing effect to create like a nicer environment, more positive environment. So I always tell people, like when they come here or when they come in our facilities, we're working with our staff and we're trying to train them. We try and keep it simple for them so they don't overanalyze and go, for a facility, we always want things photo shoot ready. Like we want it to look good. But just realize that they're participating in what we call the Positivity Project. And just bring positive energy. I realized at an early age when I was training with clients, was really successful, had long-term relationships with my clients, did what they paid me to do in the sense of, made them stronger, faster, created some functional longevity for them. But what I started to realize was they would come to me for an hour, and these were really high-powered people, influential people, and they would leave, and I knew that spending an hour with me, one thing that they did appreciate was it was a positive experience. So they might have had a negative, they're out there fighting. It's a knife fighting business out in the world and in New York. Come in, have a positive experience, and leave feeling a little bit better. So I think through our industry and through this concept and teaching people is we're trying to, again, create positive emotional energy and share that with other people. And then they go out and they share with other people, and you really have a ripple effect to what you're doing. So if we're training CEOs or influential executives or movie makers or whatever the case, or your average person, whatever it is, and they have a positive experience with us, we help them develop positive energy within themselves, then they go back out, and it's just going to be an emanation and a ripple effect across, hopefully globally, where we're just making the world a better place.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your view on the you know, if I sort of generalize and say the fitness industry, you know, certainly a lot, even a studio like this, you think you would come in to work out and to sort of improve your love handles or whatever, you know, that in most people it's like, yeah, I'm going to go to a place like this, I'm going to lose a little bit of weight, get a little bit more fit. That seems to be the kind of general message. Listening to you is it's a lot more of a complete, you know, fitness is certainly one part of it, but it's one part, and there's a lot of other things that need to be taken into consideration. So what's your thoughts about kind of where the industry is in terms of what message it's selling and where you think it's going?
Yeah, I think there's still to a large extent a fair amount of confusion out there when it comes to, because you still have a level of marketing. People are, you know, working more. There's marketing involved. People are selling things to an extent. But what I think is that people, as they develop and create a greater awareness of how physiology affects them, that the industry is going more towards education, and you're going to start to see more of an integration of, like, where you're seeing, again, going back to say WeWork and co-working spaces, that they're creating that social construct and they're taking their turn at seeing if they can create fitness and wellness. You've got like the Soho House, social construct based on F&B, but they're also getting into fitness and wellness. You're starting to see Equinox, fitness and wellness, get into hotel, travel and leisure, and so where the construct for us is we're creating more, like we have a nice lounge on the other side that can accommodate 17, 18 people, because we want to sort of integrate a sense of sociology where it's not just going to the gym here and then going to the office there and then going to eat something here. You're starting to see that integrated across the board more and more and more. We're working, I was just having a conversation with a developer yesterday who's got a 200-acre, you know, mixed-use park in New Jersey, commercial, it's got a hotel there, he's got some residential, and he's creating a whole platform based on all that, co-working, F&B, sociology, and fitness and wellness in each building, and integrating that all together. So I think it's an integration for people to understand that. Again, going back to John Wooden, he was one of the greatest basketball coaches in history, coached at UCLA. And one of his sort of Woodenisms, one of his sayings was going back to don't confuse activity with achievement. So again, teaching people a little bit about when they come in to work out at a place like this, what was their intention and their expectations. So we don't want to just jump around and exercise. Exercise is okay, but it's not the same as training. And training is a very thoughtful concept. So when people come to a studio like ours, we want to teach them a little bit about, you know, understanding, you know, periodization, how to create a program for life that fits in with them. But we'll throw events here. I think it's a lot to do with making education accessible, making education interesting, and maybe making it more about learning than education. And again, just sharing that knowledge, but creating an environment that makes sense of that. You know, old school gyms or just boutique industries, you go in and you just take a class.
Right.
I think where you're gonna see the industries evolve, a little bit like Kicks U in London, right? Kicks started out as a great personal training gym, developed a nice F&B kind of culture, and then as they're moving out more into sort of the boutique market, they're creating multiple studios with a spa and with a concept. I think you're going to see more places like this, 11,000, 15,000 square feet, that integrate a lot of different things together, more to create a community, right?
And are you actually training and educating your clients that would come for, say, personal training here? Are you, as part of that, you want to develop their knowledge about sort of fitness and wellness in general?
Yeah, 100%. So we'll have a strong education platform here.
Do people pay for that, or is it part of, how does that work? Right.
Yeah, well, some will just be offered to the community. Right. Clients who come here, this is a pay-as-you-go, so we don't have a membership base. So our education platform, in a simplistic way, will be geared towards industry professionals that, amazingly, you find a lot of clients who want to come in and take those classes. So that is, they're going to pay for those kinds of things. May not certification, but maybe just lectures or seminars. And then we'll also create more consumer-facing concepts and have guest lectures, guest speakers, open it up to the general public. Some might be paid for events, kind of depending on who's coming in and who the speaker actually is. And then we have two different programs that we're creating. One is called Centerpoint Leadership, and that's an emotional-based leadership program for organizations. And it can be as far as 4 people or 40 people. It can be top-level executives, mid-level executives, and that's about bringing a sense of self-awareness and emotional intelligence into organizations. It's been around for a while. A guy named Daniel Goleman wrote the book on emotional intelligence. Google's been doing it for a long time with their Search Inside Yourself program. And then another program we're developing is called Centerpoint Lifestyle. And what we're doing there is a more advanced program where we're teaming up with the Princeton Longevity Center. They're based out of Princeton. They have an office in Connecticut, but they're opening an office in the World Trade Center this fall. And that's a diagnostic center where you go in and you get everything done in one day. You go in the very early in the morning, you get your blood work done, and then you do contrast dye injection tests, you do DEXA scans, bone mineral density, you do anaerobic threshold tests, you do a full medical checkup with the doctor, so on and so forth, do a stress test, and you get all your results back that day, sit with the doctor, 3D scans, everything. So we're going to link up with them where we're going to create the program where the client will come in and we'll do the biomechanical assessment. So we have a very, very intelligent personal training manager here, Rua Gilna. His background is with the Postural Restoration Institute. So he works on a PRI curriculum. So working with biomechanical assessments based on postural analysis, and then also do some tests and assessments based on strength and conditioning and see where people are at from a biomechanical or physiological perspective. We'll send them to the Princeton Longevity Center, do full medical diagnostic testing, and then we'll turn them over to our sports and performance psychologists, do the psychological profiling, and you will then get a compendium of about 200 pages that's all about you. How you move, who you are internally, and who you are psychologically. Wow. And from there, it's a 12-month program that we can work with you as a coach, whether you need to go back for checkups, depending on what they find at the Princeton Longevity Center, regular checkups with the psychologist into understanding emotional intelligence and developing yourself from that perspective, and then obviously personal training here and developing yourself according to your biomechanical profile. So we're starting to do education on kind of that level.
Yeah. How do you think that affects people people in business? Is there any research about how being involved in this type of program improves performance in any way?
Oh man, 100%. I mean, you think about, again, goes back to that, your emotional energy, unlocking your cognitive ability. So you're really high-end performers. Let's even go into private equity, right? If you're talking about hedge funds, private equity firms, things like that are moving mass amounts of money forwards and backwards, right? So when you think that you have a group of traders and employees that are working on that fundamental level, they're grinding it out, and if we can affect their physiology, that affects their emotional energy, that affects their cognitive ability, and it just increase their performance by 2, 3, 4%, what that would mean to a bottom line to a company that moves, $1 to $20 billion a year, and you're talking about a 4% increase just because it's about creating more engagement with your workforce. So if people are there and they're not taking care of their physiology, they're grinding it out, they're not exercising, drinking, eating, sleeping, any of that kind of stuff, no way are they achieving their ability. Smart as they can be, they're all Ivy Leaguers, no way are they bringing their full mental capacity to work on a day-to-day basis, 365 days out of the year. I mean, you think about how athletes train. Think about Tom Brady, right? Everybody knows Tom. He's a great kind of ambassador for this type of stuff as far as living the right way, training the right way, and things like that. He has to perform for 16 hours, basically, a year, right? A football game's 60 minutes. Realistically, the game's about 3.5 hours. But even if you're adding that up, that's like 3 or 4 days of like continual work for an entire year. And then you think about corporate executives or anybody that goes to work, and they have to grind it out for 330 days a year, non-stop, right? Full on all day long. And what are they doing, in their off season? They don't really have one. So we go back again, like creating this model of physiology, emotional energy, and mental energy. 100% is going to increase their bottom line, more engagement, instead of just showing up for work, being fully engaged in what they're doing. And you're starting to see that more and more because a lot of our clients are asking us to develop, fitness and wellness centers inside their offices. So we're doing everything from 1,000 square foot movement rooms to 20,000 square foot, 24,000 square foot facilities inside corporate centers, because they understand now like the importance of integrating that into daily lives. And another reason why we're starting to see like we've been so successful in the residential context is kind of eliminating time and proximity as being the barriers to achieving any of this. Right. And now we're putting them in corporate centers, we're putting them in private offices, they're having a home. There's no excuse any longer. And they need to be well thought out, have great equipment, have great concepts. But again, it's education. So if I thought of it as a construct and we were talking about sort of our program, we would think one thing we're trying to do is help people achieve an extraordinary quality of life, as defined by them, however they want to define it. We just want to help them create a pathway to an extraordinary quality of life. We want to do that through creating a functional longevity construct and start with postural analysis, get into muscular development, and then work on cardio respiratory development and conditioning. And on the other side, work with them on our coherence model, right? The physiology, mental, emotional, mental well-being concept. And underneath there, we develop 4 pillars or 4 cornerstones just to make it easy for people and go, look, there's education and learning. You have to buy in from an education. You have to listen to what we're teaching you and not to show up. Mm-hmm. There's the functional performance-based training model. Then there's nutrition, and then there's recovery regeneration. And those are 4 kind of cornerstones that if they do this, it filters back up into this and leads to extraordinary quality of life. And that's what I think we're seeing more and more people when you talk about the future. We're talking to clients, and where our consulting firm was originally all about design, it's more and more now consulting on programming, operational capacity, what to do with these facilities, and going back to what you're saying, how can we improve bottom line? And there's nothing wrong with approaching it like that. Like we can, when you hear me talking, I'm like, we're talking about improving people's lives and making the world better. Hey man, we all want to do better in business. If we're making more money, that makes us happier, it makes us able to like provide for other people. So 100%, if we can help companies with their engagement and perform better, for sure.
I guess it can also, like we're talking about the real high performers, hedge fund managers, etc. But I guess it could also apply to, general, everyday businesses, or basic jobs, because there must be, I guess, in some of these big companies that do, maybe there's a lot of manual work as an example. There still must be, the cost to the business in terms of people not being engaged or not performing or sickness, must be huge to certain companies.
Yeah.
And I suppose, this philosophy sounds like it could make a huge difference to just, to anybody at any level, doesn't it?
Yeah. Anybody on any level. I mean, it doesn't matter what your profession, a teacher, a stay-at-home dad or stay-at-home mom, a chef in a restaurant making better food, everything works better. But the concept, again, is just thinking on a fundamental level. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. But in the sense of kind of everyday people, even if you're thinking of like physical laborers or manual laborers, Hans Selye, the who created the general adaptation syndrome, knew that you always need 2 stressors, 2 positive stressors to affect what not as a negative stressor, but one thing that might be disrupting your physiology. So like if you're a manual laborer, you need to engage your mind actively, and you need a social construct. If you're in a social industry, you need to go do something physical or do something in your mind. If you're a teacher, you need to go do something social or do something physical. Yeah, he was a big believer in that, in creating sort of like that sort of sense of coherence. Hans Selye. He was an endocrinologist, Canadian, interesting guy.
That's an interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, interesting guy.
Yeah. So really, I guess the essence of that is you've got to have not necessarily balance, but as you call it, coherence in those areas, regardless of what you do.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you think of the potential in I guess this sort of fitness and wellness business. We had a discussion a while ago on the podcast about why is there just, as according to us, around about sort of 15 to 20% of people that work out, go to gyms. And it seems to be kind of more or less stuck around that's 15 to 20%. And I guess the way you explain it, it's like, well, who isn't this relevant to? The size of the market to go after seems to be endless, doesn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I would love to find out, like, okay, what's going on with the other 80% then? Is it just a lack of awareness? Did nobody sort of open the door, create an environment that was approachable? Was it the sense that, maybe they were told when they were young that they weren't athletes or something like that, so they find that they're only intellectual, so they're intimidated, and it's a cultural kind of barrier that might be there. Part of it was, gender specificity, 20 years ago. Girls did aerobics, guys lifted weights, hippies did yoga, whatever. It's all integrated now. We all do the same types of things. We got girls lifting weights, guys doing yoga. It's like it doesn't matter. So I think that goes back to, again, like creating environments, creating equipment, creating like awareness and education that teaches people that it's not only just one modality. There's something for everybody. Human beings were designed to run, jump, lift, and carry things, period. We're not designed to sit around. That's who we are, and that's what we do as a species. And unfortunately, in modern society, we initially created a very sedentary environment. Things that we used to do this stuff naturally, right? We used to have to work hard for a living. If we're in an agricultural environment, hardcore work, right? Definitely in touch with our circadian rhythms. Evolved into an industrial society still. A lot of physical labor. We really didn't have a lot of indoor lighting and climate control. So again, in touch with circadian rhythms. Food was pretty much organic if you get your hands on it. Things like that. As we kind of come into a modern society, things have become easier. We have things that really push us towards sedentary lifestyle because it's easy. We can lay up anywhere, and there's always content now to be involved with or to be engaged with. It kind of goes back to the movie from Disney, Wall-E, right? Where they found out that mankind just started to use technology to do everything for them, and they just got fat and they lost the ability to move around, and they just floated around in just different things, right? It's horrible, right? So we're really designed to run something, lift and carry things. So we're going to create environments for that, and I find that if you do the environment right and you have a lot of different areas, you can make it approachable to people who previously, if you don't make it seem like fitness and you make it just seem like something natural for them to do, they might buy engagement. Because a lot of those kids or a lot of the people, like I don't think only 20% of kids run around on playgrounds, right? I think, you set 100 kids loose in a playground, 95 of them will run around to do something, right? And we've lost that ability as adults. So if we can create environments that are a little bit more like a playground, that allow movement in all three planes of motion, things you can jump up on, TRX straps, interesting escape equipment, wall balls, you name it, plyo boxes. Make something interesting for people to just do what they're supposed to do. And that will start to unlock the door, and then again, they'll start to be open-minded, and we teach them a little bit more about how to eat, how to sleep. So we use this thing called the Oura Ring, connected O-U-R-A. It's relatively new to me. My PTM has been using it for about a year. And it's how technology, I think, was kind of a concept that we were going to talk about a little bit. How's technology impacting us and affecting us? I think in a lot of different ways, technology is good for disseminating information, but it's starting to become so approachable now where we're getting good diagnostic feedback. So the Oura Ring, you can wear it all day long. It's a little bit like a Fitbit, or like this is a Garmin watch. It reads everything that's going on inside me right now. But an Oura Ring just does it, same thing, does it, but through putting it on your ring finger, and it connects to your pulse. I wear mine at night, and it tells me a lot about my sleep patterns. It tells me about my heart rate variability while I sleep, resting heart rate. It tells me about whether I'm getting enough REM sleep, deep sleep, light sleep. It gives me the composition of all of that, and you get a score every morning. And it's kind of gamified it. So I'm hyper aware that sleep's important, but I'm like everybody else. I want to stay up late. That's my only time to sort of disconnect from everything and kind of watch something that I want to watch on TV or something, or read a book or whatever the case may be. But it's helped me stay very aware of getting to sleep on time, because I wake up in the morning and I don't want to see a bad score. No. I want to see like a good score, you know what I mean? So it's made me more aware about, I'm going to bed at 11 tonight. No matter what, I'm getting in bed, I'm going to bed. So I think that's a little bit of like education, how things are changing, how technology will impact us in a positive way,
Do you think you're consciously positioning what you offer differently to everybody else, or is that just your belief? Because it sounds like I say, I talk to a lot of people, but it doesn't sound like you're really selling fitness at all. And I mean that in a positive way.
Yeah.
But if I was coming to join yours, like you kind of got some imagery around there, but it's not like you would imagine if I wanted to go somewhere to get a six pack. You're not selling that story, are you?
Yeah, no, not per se. I mean, a little bit on the physical perspective is I've always found the bodies that move the best look the best. Like if I look at sprinters and I look at athletes, if I do a cross section, there's a photographer named Howard Schatz that made a book called Athlete. And it just shows athletes from across the spectrum, from you name it, man, swimmers, golfers, dancers, discus throwers, whatever, all interesting bodies. You know what I mean? That like their goal was not to look good or have six pack. They just ended up looking good and having a six pack, right? So there's definitely that. But where I think the interesting thing about our brand moving forward is I want to tie off sort of our core business, the consulting, the management operations, and the service provision, have my team that's running that. I want to focus my attention on programming and creating strategic partnerships, because what I've found is, so 15, 20 years ago, this was not a great industry to invest in. It was like low margins, high risk. Yeah. The population wasn't fully embracing it, like you said. But now we're finding it is really profitable. And because there's so much awareness, and because real estate was always that biggest barrier. And what we work with real estate developers, again, across the spectrum of, I break real estate down into residential, corporate, or travel and leisure. We work in all three kind of facets of that. And we're finding that these guys, they have real estate and they have it at a good price. They have access to capital, which is also the biggest barrier for entrepreneurs like myself. Opening up facilities is capital intensive. We're looking to create strategic partnerships. We've already got a couple lined up. We find that people want to get into the fitness industry now, but they don't know how. And they want to kind of be gym owners. And it's like any other investment, like somebody investing in a tech firm. Maybe they don't know tech, but they want to work with the right company that can get them involved. And not just investing in that company, but they want to have it themselves. Like developers are finding themselves having to develop these large scale entities that they're not in the gym business. They're 20, 30, 40,000 square foot facilities. And there aren't a lot of companies out there that run it. You have commercial industries that don't know how to deal with a captive audience per se. You have residential that don't know how to sell memberships to an outside person on what they're going to look like. So our company is uniquely situated in the sense that we can design it, manage it, and program it. And we have expertise both from the commercial perspective, consumer-facing concept, and how to work with a captive audience inside, which is a whole different level of hospitality over customer service. So I think that we'll be able to create really strong strategic partnerships and help people who want to get into the industry, but want to limit their risk, and show them that we have proof of concept, that we've been at this for a long time, and we can help them kind of spin it out. And also kind of work on strategic partnerships with, there are a lot of people in the fitness industry that have great ideas, young, old, whatever the case may be, but they don't know how to write a business plan. It's not their wheelhouse. They haven't done it before. They don't have access to capital, but they really got a good concept. So I want to create strategic partnerships there as well, be an incubator, and be a facilitator for people who have good ideas and help them get them off the ground. And that's really where I see our brand going in the future. And one thing that I feel is unique about us is we don't just do one thing and do it well. We do several things, and it's taken a long time, but I feel like we do several things well now.
Yeah. Where do you say in the future, where will fitness take place? You've talked about a lot of residential, which is a part of what you do, and in the office. Do you think that the sort of standalone gym, which I guess is probably the predominant place you go for fitness, do you think that will sort of emerge to be in different parts of where you live, like more into where, like actually where you're living in your living space and things like that, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be integrated now, where it won't be segregated anymore, where you have to actually go somewhere. So we're already seeing that integration, obviously, in residential. We're getting really, really cool, very interesting, high-level commercial caliber facilities in the residential context, seeing it in the corporate context. But again, taking two different examples, one like the park that we're talking about, it's called Connell Park in Berkeley Heights, New Jersey. And it's about 200 acres, and again, mixed use, multiple buildings. And they're integrating co-working, specific office space, hotel, residential, fitness, wellness, and food and beverage all around, like in different zones within one building, so that it's all right there, so that you may lay up, check your emails, do work for an hour, eat some food while you're doing it, and know that you got a class that you can take in an hour and a half. Take it, come back, do your work. So how do you integrate all of this stuff? But more importantly, teaching people about what to do outside of all of this and going to the gym and all this preparation. So one of our things about our company is we say we train for life. Like, what are you training for? You can train for a specific event for sure, but just training for life. So, I'm going to be going to Portugal in a week with my kids, and we're going to be surfing, We're going to be hiking, hopefully some pretty extreme stuff, and we're going to be horseback riding. And we're trying to teach people to be a little bit more engaged. So we just worked with Men's Journal yesterday. They had a photo shoot here, and I was really, really excited about that because I've been a huge Men's Journal advocate for like 20 years. I love it because they're not just about fitness, but they are. A little bit different than, say, Men's Health is a lot about physical fitness. Men's Journal is about this integrated lifestyle of like good whiskey, good beer, great places to go see, but extreme adventures like, rock climbing, mountain climbing, kayaking, surfing, volleyball camps. So trying to teach people, to participate in more active adventures. Don't just go to the beach. Don't go from your seat here at the office to your seat at the beach, drink, then come back and need a vacation from vacation. But, that's fun, but go integrate it. Play some volleyball while you're at the beach. Do something a little bit more physically active. So.
And it sounds like it's an exciting message. I've got friends that I've known for years, and they've always said to me, why haven't you got me in fitness? And I've said, well, because you don't like going in gyms, you hate it. Yeah. And when we've had this debate, they've always said, but I don't like what a gym is. But the way you explain it, that sort of high performance life, it sounds exciting, and it's like an adventure, and it's like, how do I get in shape to do that? So I think it seems to be the way that in a lot of cases it gets positioned. And certainly, I suppose when you explain those, those different parts of a building, a residential community where you've got your gym, and then you're educating people, bringing it together. I think it sounds like a nice sort of vision, really.
Yeah, I think there's opportunities for entrepreneurs in the future, and probably people you've touched base with, or some people you can with your podcast. Is part of those strategic partnerships or relationships is working with adventure outfit companies. That because people, they don't know what they don't know. Like they don't know what they're missing by not going backpacking or camping for 2 days out in the wilderness, or going on a surf safari, or whatever the case may be. So they will be more than happy to just pay somebody to create this experience for them, and that'd be an amazing thing. It's not that people don't want to go do it; they just aren't aware of what's out there, and then they don't know how to find a trailhead. Half the time, they look like the rest of the forest. If you're fortunate, you see other cars parked by this hole in the shrubberies, and you realize there's a trail that goes that way. But teaching people how can you do this stuff, and so different part of the education, but exposing people to this kind of lifestyle.
And with the apartment complex gyms and even hotels, a lot of them are, certainly the majority of them are very, they're unmanned. There's nobody in there. You're not getting any kind of education. You've got a set of dumbbells, an elliptical, a treadmill, and a couple of machines. Do you also see that space needing to change now in hospitality and multi-housing?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, once you hit a certain threshold, in New York it's interesting. When they build the residential developments here and we have a pool, DOH codes here, Department of Health codes say it has to be lifeguarded. So there's going to be a level of manned facility anyway if you happen to have a pool. So it kind of started from there. But once you get to 10,000 square feet or 1,000 square meters or more, you're going to want that staff there at least at a fundamental level to help people understand how to engage, make sure the place is photo shoot ready, make sure the environment's hygienic and clean, so on and so forth, especially on the corporate side where you have to run it like a quasi-commercial kind of concept. But I would say like we have a project called Jackson Park out in Long Island City for Tishman Speyer. It's 52,000 square foot amenity pavilion. And on each floor is about 10,000 square feet. We have a club level, really beautiful co-working, chef's kitchen, lounge, all that kind of stuff. Then we have a full-on gym and the one thing that I think gets used the most there is we have an escape octagon system that we put in, which is like mind-blowing to people. Like it's so cool that they have this kind of concept in their gym. Next level up is a full pool and spa. Next level up is full sports courts. So we have squash, full-on basketball, and then a rooftop pool. And this is what people are getting, and it's fully manned. We have a manager, general manager, assistant manager, supervisor, and 33 staff members there.
Wow.
It's a full-on, commercial facility of 52,000 square feet. So you're starting to see that more and more, and it's engagement. So this is a residential facility, right?
That's
so
amazing,
they have 1,800 units. We have average anywhere between 900 to 1,200 check-ins a day in a residential gym. You know what I mean? So I think more and more you're going to see this be manned because it has to be activated, a space.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on kind of the next 5 to 10 years? I know it's difficult, but where do you see the and I'll call it fitness industry, but after talking to you, I'm kind of not sure whether that is what a good name
the
to
human
call
being
it.
industry. Yeah.
But yeah, what are some of your tips on in terms of trends and things that are likely to happen that are probably not, majority of people listening are not yet seeing where they are?
Yeah. I'd see more of the integration of what we're talking about. I think seeing more and more interesting environments where you're going to get an integration of, odd objects, zones for training movement patterns that are integrated intelligently where it can just be a gym, or at times it can be integrated into semi-private or group fitness kind of concepts, and seeing where it's contiguous with a whole environment of understanding how F&B supports that, how social environments support that. So again, having a place where people can lay up, do some work before and after, breaking down the barriers, and then starting to understand how technology is going to impact us. So the technology thing is interesting. You're starting to find, obviously, content for exercise prescription that's been around for a long time. We've had PX90, we've had, you could watch TV back in the day and see fitness on it, but you're getting more integrated ways to understand and get some education from there. I don't think you'll ever be able to replace, obviously, human interaction and working with a strength coach or a professional, but it's that next step up. But I think getting into technology that's going to give you sort of biometric feedback. So whether we use an in-body bioimpedance monitor here to help people understand extracellular hydration levels, body fat percentage, segmental weight analysis to see if we have a loading pattern. Again, going back to the Oura Ring or the Garmin watches or Fitbits, and starting to have technology that's a little bit of a feedback so people understand themselves better. So creating self-awareness on a whole different level, I think, is where the industry's going. So, and then having professionals get in, and it's always been the case where you have to help the general public understand, again, the activity and achievement thing. What do they need to know? Like, what is really beneficial and what's kind of activity, what's smoke and mirrors and things like that, what's substantive. It's always cool to do, like when we go in and design, we think, and we consult with people, we look at trend analysis. So we look at what's current now, like what's fashionable for the next 6 months, and that's cool. You always want to kind of pay attention to what's fun. And then we look at things that are long-term, what's enduring, because this is not something you check off a list. You don't get in shape and you got that covered. Is this something that goes from the cradle to the grave? Your entire life, and it's a lifestyle choice. And that's really, like, any entrepreneur or anybody I think in our industry should be looking at this of like, how does it integrate into a lifestyle? And then looking, and we're not dictating to people what lifestyle they should have. We're just trying, our challenge is to facilitate what we do that integrates into a lifestyle that they choose. So that goes back into these residential developments. People are choosing where to live in New York. There's no absence of really nice real estate here and buildings to move into. And what we get all the time, feedback, is what people are interested in is obviously the basic metrics, but they're interested in what the fitness and wellness component and the other amenities are now, because it's highly important to them. They're like, it means something to them, and they want to know who designed it. So fortunately, we carry some cachet, but we're also very fortunate that we work with the top interior designers and design architects globally. A lot of Pritzker Prize winning architects, and they make the environment interesting to integrate to. So we're getting ready to install a gym at 53 West 53rd Street for Heinz Development, and that's part of it's called the MoMA Tower Vert. It's Jean Nouvel, Pritzker Prize winning architect from Paris. The interior designs were done by Thierry Despont, another French award-winning interior architect. And it's increased the MoMA's, the Museum of Modern Art's gallery space by 30%. So you're going to get a very specific buyer buying in there. And we have a very cool avant-garde, fitness facility. And then you'll go over maybe to 220 Central Park South, more old school, Robert A.M. Stern, classical architecture, whole different ball game there. Still beautiful, kind of equal demographic range, socioeconomic demographic range. And our concept's still similar. We bring our type of equipment in, but it's represented in a different way. Yeah. So I think the challenge is finding ways to make this fit seamlessly now. Once people have bought in, now things matter. And again, I'd like to give you props for developing equipment and things that aesthetically look good, but not at the sacrifice for functionality. So for us, when we work with interior designers, our argument and our battle with them always is it's function over form for us, and it's usually form over function for them. And we have to find that middle ground, because for us, the functionality's got to be there first, and then, but we have a very strong eye towards form. And that's why I like working with Escape quite a bit. You know, I think you guys have a really, all your stuff is extremely functional, but you're starting to really put the polish on there, make it look good. And if something looks interesting, people will pick it up. They're more prone to pick it up, you know? So.
And just finishing off on technology, do you see there being more of this sort of Peloton style of concept where people are doing things in their own home and being supported by trainers? Or do you think, you know, you can't get away from having to come and have this sort of face-to-face relationship with somebody?
Yeah, I think it goes back in a couple ways. No man is an island. I think people thrive on social constructs. I start my day out, even though I have a really cool space to work in, I start my days out at cafes around New York, because I like being around other people and just kind of hearing that noise and be around while I do my kind of thing. It's why people like the group exercise. So I think, you know, specific home gyms, like in someone's home, extremely important, but not as a primary outlet. It just, if it fits in and it helps them stay where they are. But I think more and more people just want to engage and be in environments around other people. It's motivating, and people kind of need that social energy. When you think about like equipment and something like referencing Peloton, I think that what they've done and that's so good is that a spin class or indoor cycling class was relatively easy to recreate on a bike with that screen in a relatively immersive environment, even though you can be around other people. So at the TWA hotel gym that we did, we have a Peloton studio. We had 13 Peloton bikes there. So you have people taking different classes, but they're around other people, right? So they've recreated that. The other things are sometimes a little bit more gadgetry, and you won't be able to replace, again, that. You can't replace with somebody's cueing you a slight variation in your hip tilt, which will unlock a whole host of, you know, your kinetic chain issues or whatever's going on, but it's better than nothing. So wearable technology where we're getting interfaces on, you know, any kind of communication device, whether it's some content that we have that's geared up on machines, showing people some fundamentals, for sure. I think technology is definitely gonna help create that for people. There's never gonna be a replacement for working with a coach or someone who can teach you about your body, because our bodies are amazing. I mean, they're super complicated. We have a lot of functional issues from, again, goes back to where we were designed to run, jump, lift, and carry things. We're not designed to sit. This is one of the worst things we could ever be doing, what you and I are doing for the last hour. You know what I mean? Like, everything's out of whack. I mean, our hips are out of tilt, or like our back's rounded out, you name it, our hamstrings are getting shorter and tighter. So we have to teach people, because everybody out there, even though we live in New York and we move more than a lot of people in the rest of the country, it's not nearly enough, and we create a lot of dysfunction, and we need people to help put us back together. I think where you've seen sort of like group exercise and you've seen technology come in and sort of integrate and create more awareness, I think what you're going to see in the future is a reverberation back into the human being approach. More and more people, because you just can't get it, and more of us are having functional issues. And when we think about functional longevity, how we're going to age and move in our 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's going to come a lot to working with highly educated, specialized people who can teach you the small issues and things that are going on with your body that you can't find in a general workout app. That's fine if you're young and you're in good shape and you're looking for some inspiration, sure. But again, it goes back to exercise is good, but it's not the same thing as training. It's not a well thought out program. It's not, you know, periodization, and it's not tempo prescription that fits who you are and what your particular issues or needs are going to be.
Yeah.
You know? So I think we're going to go back towards human interactions more and more, but the humans we're interacting with, like us, we're going to be using devices and technology to give us that feedback. Right. So you're going to see an integration of professionals using technology to help the individual versus the individual getting what they need from a machine. I just don't think a machine can do what we do.
And help them understand what that's saying and what they need to do about it, I guess. As well.
Yeah, the interpretation of the data and everything is important, you know.
So one more question, but before I ask it, if people are interested in what you do or sort of taking on your services, how can they engage with you, find you? get in touch?
Easy. Just thewrightfit.com. So yeah, you know, my last name is Wright, so it's THEWRIGHTFIT.com. Just general inbox, anybody can reach out. This is the Performance Lab, so we also have, you know, the website for the Performance Lab, NYC.com. So, and they can link through there through our general website. So, classic website like Little Surfing, they can get in touch with us right away.
And you are open for if people have got projects, residential hotels, and that your consultancy part of the business, you're
100%.
still taking on clients for that.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we've been engaged in about 7 different hotel projects. We've worked with the Standard Hotels in Miami, LA. We've done a nice hotel outside of San Francisco Airport, the TWA Hotel, and we're working with Highgate Hotels right now on a really progressive concept for them in New York at the Royalton Hotel.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay. And we'll
really
put
cool.
some stuff in the show notes as well, so people can find you.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
So last question then. Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you have believed is impossible, or other people have said is impossible, and gone on to make it possible. What would be a memorable example of escaping your own personal limits?
Oh, that's a good idea. I think, you know, the concept of taking on this project, for instance. So I'm self-financed, and I believe 100%. I love your tagline, and I believe that the thing that holds us back is ourself and our sort of self-limitations that we put in front of us. So if I was sane, or if I listened to my wife, I never would have taken the lease here and figured out how to pay for the build out and everything. So, you know, I think just scaling a business on internal cash flow was something that if I had thought about limitations, I never would have done it. You know, financial limitations, energy, the drive to come every day and try and build this while we're building something else. You know, 100%. And, you know, that's a good question. You know, I think overcoming our own, like, my own sort of sense of, you know, when I graduated from school, I was in pre-law, and I had a business minor, was modeling a little bit, was going to go to law school. And, you know, I think if anybody would have told me that you're nuts for just kind of traveling around the world and experiencing cultures and then kind of like just winging it and, like, you know, starting a business based on a whim or an idea, I think if I had thought of those limitations, I never would have gone down this road or started this journey. Would have just gotten a job somewhere that's nice and safe. But that's not what we do as entrepreneurs, right? We don't really think about limitations. So I love escaping your limits and, like, you know, kind of setting yourself free and you know, tapping into our potential and, like, just going for it. You know?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, I recommend anyone who's in business and who's thinking that their market's limited and there's not a lot of opportunity to grow. I think this is a great episode. It's certainly got me to think, wow, you know, there is so much out there if you just look at things in a slightly different way to probably what we're all used to doing. So it's been a wonderful conversation. I wish you best wishes for everything in the future, and thanks for your time.
Man. Oh, man, it's been a pleasure. Yeah, always. Thank you.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you did, then please go over to iTunes and subscribe to the Escape Your Limits podcast. Leave a review, leave a comment. It really would help us a lot to continue to keep these going.